One of the great things about being a political moderate like I am is that you get to make fun of both sides. It's really great. The seat of ridicule is warm and comfy. There's a new ideological scuffle brewing in the strange agora of modern life. On the one side, you've got kind of this new Nietzschean renegade. These are the accelerationists, the crypto-anarchists. And they're on the left and the right, interestingly. They want to see society burned down and then we can start over again. And so you'll see this, like, there's some really left-wing versions of it that are kind of techno-libertarians. There's even this kind of red-pilled Christian futurists who are whispering about the end of democracy with a kind of erotic thrill. These folks, whether they're sort of brewing ayahuasca in a yurt or building bunkers in New Zealand, they're dreaming about escape velocity. Basically, they're trying to just get beyond the mid-wit consensus that they see all around them. And so that's why they have this kind of Nietzschean element, whether they're on the right or the left. On the other side, you've got the defenders of bourgeois virtue. And when I say bourgeois virtue, let's be clear, all I mean is middle-class virtue. So the kind of virtues that you have when you're a stakeholder, like you have a family, maybe you have some property, something like that. I don't mean like bougie, like the word has come to mean, like aristocratic or wealthy. That's not the real meaning of the term. Bourgeois virtue means sort of middle-class virtues. So you've got these kind of revolutionaries on one side, and then you've got these sort of middle-class people who want stability. The civility folks, basically, the spreadsheet dads, the public school moms, the local librarians. This goes all the way back to Confucius and Aristotle, though, this kind of ethical view about stability and virtues helping us all get along better. And these are the constitutionalists. And I suppose like a few kind of stubborn Enlightenment philosophers, you know, the Steven Pinkers of the crowd, who like the rules and regulations. I mean, I'm making fun of all this, but I'm more with the stability crowd than the revolutionary crowd. But let me explain the dynamic. My camp, the stability camp, is not about utopias or apocalypses. It's really about making dinner, paying your taxes, getting your kids through school. You're basically trying to hold it all together. The wheels are coming off and you are basically just trying to get through the day. So today on Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge, we're looking at this kind of new debate, this new incarnation of the revolutionaries versus the stabilizers. Welcome. Let's be clear, the real divide isn't really between the left and the right anymore. It feels like that, and the media wants it to play like that. The tension I want to talk about today is between those who have skin in the game and those who don't. And when I say skin in the game, I mean there's those people who have real squirmy, vulnerable skin in the form of children and aging parents, and those who don't. You want to know who's willing to watch the world burn? It's rarely the parent of a toddler. People raising children tend to value zoning laws, vaccine schedules, bridges that don't collapse, and sort of general absence of armed militias in the supermarket. Confucius understood this better than any of the sort of Twitter or ex-contrarians ever could. He wasn't preaching cosmic liberation, he was basically preaching what we call filial piety, what the Chinese call shao. Social rituals, social harmony, respect for family members and other people's families. He knew that civilization is built not on spontaneous genius or disruptive vision, but really kind of on repetition and duty and moral cultivation. Which is why when people in their teens read Confucius, it seems really dull to them. Like he seems dull, but this is what he thinks society really has to attend to, are these kind of dull but necessary aspects of civility. And likewise, Aristotle didn't seek revolutions. He basically was trying to create a polis, a small social organization which has a kind of steady development of virtue within stable institutions. And he knew that flourishing doesn't happen like in a vacuum. It requires context and this constant vigilant education. There's a social historian that you may be familiar with named Deirdre McCloskey. She wrote a whole series of books. They're great. about sort of the development of the modern mind, the modern family, the modern economic system. Instead of looking at it like a sort of a Marxist or even a capitalist economic story, she looks at it sort of more in terms of a psychological and even this area of virtues or values story. She argues that what makes sort of the modern world safer and so successful are these kind of bourgeois virtues or values. In her defense of bourgeois dignity, she argues that capitalism, if it's embedded in a culture of honesty, prudence, and trust, can be not just efficient, but actually ethical, like a good thing. It's not perfect, but it beats the cycles of sort of romantic destruction that so often, follow kind of revolutionary fervor. This is where our man Edmund Burke comes strolling in with his powdered wig, bringing his sort of anti-revolutionary logic. Burke didn't trust revolutions. Now, he was friends with Thomas Paine, but they really disagreed on this point very vociferously. Burke didn't trust revolutions. He thought institutions, even flawed ones, are basically much better than starting from scratch because they've accumulated wisdom over many, many generations. And if you tear them down in the name of kind of abstract purity, you don't get utopia, you get chaos. And then immediately after chaos, you get tyranny, basically, which is usually worse than the one you overthrew. I was thinking about the tension between these impulses that we have, it's kind of like two hearts beat within my breast, One is sort of for revolution and sort of accelerating change, and the other is for the slow stability of the sort of stakeholder kind I was describing. And I was thinking, if you've seen Fight Club or read the novel, Fight Club is basically like a modern Jekyll and Hyde story, but it also contains this tension between these impulses I was describing. The Tyler Durden character, played by Brad Pitt in the movie, is really like one of these accelerationists. I mean, he is an accelerationist. He's part right-wing and part left-wing. It's unclear. Very charismatic, anti-corporate, anti-bourgeoisie, anti-institutional. He's all about destroying the system so he can free in this case, the male ego from its kind of IKEA prison. And, the narrator here is kind of enthralled by Tyler Durden's anarchism, but gradually realizes that Tyler Durden's revolution is just kind of another domination game, another power game. And in the end, this sort of Edward Norton character reclaims responsibility and tries to sort of rebuild a life, not just sort of giving up on the social destruction, but also tries to rebuild like a domestic life with his girlfriend. And he's burned a lot of those bridges, as you recall. So why this kind of works is that the story illustrates the kind of thrill and the danger of anarchic revolt, especially when it turns kind of authoritarian. And I have a lot of friends, as a professor, I'm rubbing shoulders with a lot of far left people. And I see in them, particularly the younger men, sort of have this kind of taste for destruction, and they sort of wrap it up in the guise of social justice. But I see you. Another great example of this tension between these two parts of ourselves can be seen even in Homer's Iliad. Like if you think about Achilles versus Hector, Achilles is kind of a Nietzschean character, kind of an Ubermensch, very proud, very individualistic, willing to let the world burn because he's been dishonored. And he opts out of social responsibility until eventually his personal grief transforms him and he gets in the fight. But you contrast this with Hector, and Hector's like a family man. He's a city defender. He's someone who fights not for glory, but for his people and their fragile civilization. So the Iliad kind of pits heroic rage against, something like civic duty, showing the tension between like personal greatness and communal survival. The Nietzscheans of our current moment, the accelerationists on the left and the right, they kind of share a certain mood. The mood is sort of disgust with mediocrity. They're also kind of bored with procedural politics. They have a thirst for the real, the raw, the unfiltered. But, rawness is not a virtue, it's a condition. And the problem with burning it all down is that someone always has to clean up the ashes. Usually it's the people who didn't want the fire in the first place. So now this is not a call for complacency. We need reform. We need bold thinking. But we also need continuity, predictability, and institutions that allow people to plan a life, especially if that life includes people who depend on you. I think our current world is sort of seduced by the aesthetics of collapse. In the films we're watching, in the stories, the narratives, the debates we're having, I would say it seems revolutionary to me to defend the ordinary, like to praise the accountant, the teacher, the town planner, the plumber, to say, no, I won't be optimizing my personal brand for the apocalypse. I'm packing a lunchbox and keeping the lights on. At the risk of sounding very old, and I know I can't help it, but I don't think the future belongs to the pirate or the prophet or the sort of disruptor, the revolutionary. It belongs to the person who figures out how to patch the plumbing without blowing the water main. Civilization is slow, it's boring, and that's why it works. But none of that stuff gets likes or even attention online, and so the media landscape is sort of accentuating and exacerbating and sort of pushing for more and more revolutionary type stances, more and more accelerationism. But let's not trade our sort of civilized world for sexy live stream implosions, which are going to get a bunch of likes. All right, if society stays together long enough for us to arrive at next week, then I will see you there for another episode of Professor Asma's Guide to Unusual Knowledge. And remember, always stay curious.